Did I waste a box of Portra 400 4x5? Stick around to find out.
That was a challenge.
Back around 2010, I got a large format photo bug. I checked out a camera from school and bought 2 boxes of Portra 4x5, 160 and 400. Check it out, that's when they called it New Portra, back when they replaced all the Portra variants with a single variety of Portra. I shot the 160 back then, around 2010 I think, and produced only one photo I cared about, out of 10 sheets. It was kind of discouraging. 4 sheets into a box of 400, I got even more discouraged and never brought myself back around to it. I convinced myself I wouldn't shoot it until I could be worthy of it. So 2013 came and went, and it's been sitting around expiring more and more every day. I always drag the film around with me, never refrigerating it, especially in my little fit of grad school self-destructiveness. Anyway, so here I am in 2020, high off of my 2000 expired Ektachrome I shot in last week's vlog. The stuff that had sat around in my fridge for like 20 years. I decided to tick another box off my procrastination scorecard. So I took all 6 sheets of my expired Portra 400 and decided to shoot it all in one night. You're seeing my shoot with Kaylee as she volunteered her modeling skills to help me make the most of this wonderful but dying film. Before I get too far, I'd like to apologize to my viewers, not for the lack of narration in last week's episode, but for my very short captions on screen. I did not mean to make you have to stop and pause so much, and in hindsight, it seems like not a great idea, so I will try to avoid doing that in the future, unless it's like a joke or something. I was reasonably sure I wouldn't have to worry too much about hitting my exposure. Portra has a lot of latitude, and it seems to hold up pretty well these days. Even though it was never stored in a fridge, it was also not in hot cars or anything particularly worse than room temperature. In fact, it's probably been cold fairly often, even if it wasn't refrigerated. Unfortunately, the sun did not cooperate with our plans because it was completely set by the time we got started with photos, except for maybe a little bit you can see through the windows here. Which is also where I put my 2 strobes, my Godox or Flashpoint AD600 Pro, and then the little bare bulb 360 flash, I think is what they call it. Also Flashpoint branded, by the way. I had it in a strip box, and I had the AD600 Pro in an umbrella. I had them shooting through the window to try to create some kind of window light look, which I think was actually fairly successful. Photographically speaking, I had plenty of light. The catch was that I did not have modeling light, and there were not many lights in the apartment, so I didn't have much light to focus by. If you've never seen the ground glass of a large format view camera, it's pretty beautiful, but very dim. You have the foxhole appearance, so you kind of have to move around, and it usually requires the use of a magnifier like a loop or a stitch counter, which is what I'm using here. So when you combine a barely lit subject with a view camera, you get what I had, which was an extremely difficult task to focus. It was very difficult, but I worked through it patiently and tried to step up my f-stop as high as I could. I dragged the shutter about half a second on the early shots, especially to try to get some ambient light in there, because I didn't want to load the place up with flash, and I didn't want to just have it completely fall dark in the background. So of course I had to choose the hardest possible light to work with. And by the way, I'm sharing the digital photos as we go. It's I'm the one who decided to stick with this. as I usually do, I shot digital, not necessarily for a safety, but to kind of give a different look and to also establish a rhythm and to be my Polaroid test. Back in the day, they used all these Polaroid peel-apart films to test exposures for the quote-unquote important picture. And with time, a lot of people realized that they liked those just as much as they did the final picture. And in reality, they would use both of those for assignments and works. And I don't see why we can't do that with digital. So, that's what I'm doing with this. People like to say that film makes you slow down and think. And I think that's especially true with 4x5. There were 6 frames, and that was a whole shoot on large format. Imagine doing a digital shoot with only 6 frames. I had to work very deliberately and carefully not to leave the iris open and accidentally expose the sheet of film in the camera. I had to make sure the flash fired, at least on the ones that had ambient light in them. I obsessively checked focus because on that dim ground glass, it's just really hard to see sometimes. Some of the later shots it was easier, but on these early shots, it was difficult. You'll notice through a lot of these that I'm doing my best to dress the set, so to speak. I moved the pictures off the countertops. I moved some pictures off of the TV stand. I'm trying to be conscious of what's in the frame, especially color-wise, but also just things that could be distractions. There could also be things that you don't want to retouch that are in there. And in real time, you can see where I decided that this little kitchen setup was not something I was going to burn a sheet of film on. I couldn't get a feel for it. I got some okay digital frames, and if I did wind up liking it later, at least I would have the digital frames. But I could never get into this idea for the 4x5, and also the lens choices and everything else would have been difficult. So you'll see that I decided to skip it over. But hey, I've still got some frames from it. However, I did like the wardrobe and Kaylee's pose she was doing here, and I liked the attitude and everything, but I gave it a new location, which was the entranceway to her bathroom. Bonus for the bathroom is that it was incredibly well lit. I didn't even realize that at first, but it worked out really well. I actually, for some of these, I used the bathroom light as the key and actually filled in just a bit with the flashes that were still off to the side of the room, and let them kind of light that wall just slightly in the foreground. And let me say, focusing with that bathroom light was so much easier, especially from that first setup. So I gave myself a pretty good chance of hitting focus despite really not knowing until I developed the film. Also, I'm trying to be more conscious of colors that are going on in here. I like this because her wardrobe often blended in with the warmer lights I was choosing. So in her skirt in that one scene was neutral, and her top is neutral. The floral patterns on that kind of match the warm tones, things like that. I'm trying to get more intentional and more interesting with my color choices. So things like that don't become habits overnight. You have to try to incorporate them in your work a little bit at a time, and it's going to feel like you never will get it, but you will. It just takes a lot of repetition. It's the same with watching the edges of your frames, getting your horizon straight, things like that. So keep on trying and it will work its way into your work eventually. And after 2 hours of very meticulous, kind of taxing hard work and some great modeling from Kaylee, I had burned through my 6 sheets of Portra, and it was just a matter of developing it and finding out if they turned out. That's what I'm doing here with the 20th century 4x5 reel, by the way. Testing it out. Seems to be good so far. Although I accidentally turned the emulsion the wrong way, but maybe we'll talk about that if you want to hear about it. You want to see a review of this? And I'd like to thank my patrons listed on screen here. You help make things like this possible. And so here you go. All 6 frames were in focus. I'm actually pretty happy with these. Some of them I'm really happy with. And even the one I wasn't quite sure worked out or not, actually worked out pretty well. And it's growing on me. I hope maybe this can inspire you to take some stuff out that you think you're not ready for, or just are putting off because you don't think you're worthy, and give it a go. And you can learn even if you do screw it up. If I had messed up these pictures, I could have said, I'm sure I could have learned something from them. And regardless, it's better than just letting that film sit around, because even if I had put it in the fridge, look up cosmic rays, it still could have gotten ruined. Thank you for watching. If you like adventures in digital and film and things like this, subscribe, turn on notifications, click like and comment. I love hearing your comments, and I'll see you back next week. Thanks. Bye.